Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to connect the massive global appeal of the NBA with the super intricate financial rules that actually run the league behind the scenes. We always see the massive dunks, the crazy highlights, and those jaw-dropping multi-million-dollar contracts, right? But figuring out the actual economic engine driving all of that, it's an absolutely fascinating journey. Let's get into it.
First up, just think about who is actually watching. Check out this stat from Playfly Insights. A staggering 56% of NBA fans are under the age of 44. 56%! When you compare that across the entire landscape of American athletics, it gives the NBA the absolute youngest audience out of all the major US sports leagues. That is a huge demographic advantage when you're trying to predict future growth and, long-term brand loyalty.
And this young crowd, they're also incredibly diverse. With 40% of the fan base identifying as non-white, the NBA has basically built an absolute powerhouse of a selling point. Media networks and advertisers are literally desperate to reach these exact, often super elusive demographics.
So here's our roadmap for how we're going to unpack all this. We'll hit 1. A younger, diverse fan base. 2. Media rights and forever fans. 3. The 2011 CBA changes. 4. Testing the competitive balance. And finally, 5. Player salaries and efficiency. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, a younger, diverse fan base. This demographic advantage we just talked about, it's a massive part of what builds the NBA's cultural dominance. The individual marketability of NBA players it's unprecedented. 7 of the top 10 most followed US athletes on social media are NBA players. We're talking global icons here, guys like LeBron James and Steph Curry. Backed by over 2 billion social media followers worldwide across the league, the teams, and the players, the NBA has created this star-driven ecosystem where the athletes themselves are literal media empires. To put that in perspective, almost 1 billion people globally view portions of an NBA game. That's just huge.
Moving right along to Section 2, media rights and forever fans. So, what does this massive, tech-savvy audience actually mean for the business? Well, it translates directly into astronomical, mind-boggling numbers. The NBA's new media rights deal is estimated to hit somewhere between $60 billion and $72 billion. Billion, with a B! With tech giants like Amazon and Netflix jumping into the bidding war against traditional networks, the league is totally leveraging these powerful demographics. Add in an international media rights value of around $715 million, which, by the way, is the highest among U.S. sports, and the NBA is perfectly set up for a truly historic payday. Now, what's really fascinating is how these tech platforms actually plan to use the games. Playfly Insights brought up this really cool concept called the Forever Fan. Basically, these are highly passionate fans who lock onto a franchise at a really young age and just never let go. The top 5 Forever Fan teams are the Pelicans, Grizzlies, Nets, Wizards, and Thunder. Now get this, these 5 teams only had 33 national TV appearances combined in a single recent season. So companies like Amazon are super interested in national streaming rights because they want to capture these deeply passionate but nationally underrepresented fan bases to drive untapped streaming revenue. It's a brilliant strategy.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 2011 CBA changes. Okay, so now that we've seen exactly why the NBA product is so incredibly valuable, let's shift gears. We need to look at how this massive flood of money is actually managed and restricted by the league. To do this, we're relying on a brilliantly detailed economic thesis out of Duke University by Nicholas Yam. This research does a deep dive into the financial fallout of the 2011 labor agreement between the owners and the players. It really lets us look under the hood and see the actual math behind the business of basketball. Right at the heart of all this is the collective bargaining agreement, or the CBA. Think of it like the ultimate constitution for the league's economy. The 2011 CBA was a real turning point. It actually ended a prolonged lockout and caused the players' guaranteed share of revenue, what they call basketball-related income, or BRI, to drop from 57% down to an even 50%. Honestly, that is a massive, massive shift of billions of dollars straight from the labor side back over to the management side. The CBA is also what dictates the salary cap. Now, unlike the NFL, which uses a very strict hard cap, the NBA uses a soft salary cap. What that means is teams have a budget constraint for player contracts, but they can legally exceed it using some very specific exceptions, assuming they're willing to pay some hefty financial penalties. The 2011 CBA actually tightened this whole system, setting the cap base at 44.74% of the basketball-related income. The entire goal here? Competitive balance. They wanted to prevent the absolute wealthiest, highest revenue teams from just buying up and hoarding all the best talent. To actually enforce this soft cap, they brought in a deeply punitive, progressive luxury tax. The penalties scale upward pretty dramatically. So if a team is just barely over the tax level, they pay $1.50 for every single dollar over. But for repeat offenders who are deep into the tax, they can pay up to $4.75 for a single dollar spent over the cap. Ouch. They also paired this with an amnesty provision, basically giving teams a one-time pass to completely wipe a disastrous contract off their books. The league's message was loud and clear. If you try to buy a championship by overspending, it's going to cost you an absolute fortune.
Let's move on to Section 4, testing the competitive balance.
So, the whole point of these incredibly harsh financial penalties was to stop the big markets from dominating, right? Which leads us to a super critical economic question. Did the progressive taxes, the repeater penalties, and those salary cap tweaks actually successfully level the playing field for all 30 teams? Did it stop the exact same teams from winning year after year?
Well, surprisingly, the academic data says no. After running some pretty complex econometric models, specifically these regressions that analyze historical trends and team winning percentages, the research reveals that the 2011 CBA did not produce any statistically significant improvement in competitive balance. Basically, the previous season's winning percentage was still a really strong predictor of the current season's success. All those insanely complex financial penalties, they completely failed to mechanically force parity onto the court.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, Player Salaries and Efficiency. Let's look at how all these strict rules and that big drop in the overall revenue share affected the actual paychecks of individual players. Remember, since the players' overall slice of the pie dropped from 57% down to 50%, researchers really wanted to know exactly who absorbed that financial hit. Did everyone just take a flat 7% pay cut? Or did the burden fall completely on a specific class of players?
To figure this out, economists measured wages against performance using a metric called the Player Efficiency Rating, or PER. PER basically takes all of a player's positive actions, subtracts their negative actions, and then adjusts for the pace of the game to give this one single per-minute productivity score. And the research confirmed that a player's PER explains the absolute greatest amount of variation in their total earnings. Simply put, your individual, quantifiable, on-court performance is the ultimate driver of your wage in the NBA.
And this totally highlights the ultimate irony of the 2011 CBA. While the rules were heavily designed to improve equality across the league, the actual result for the workforce was the exact opposite. After 2011, high-performing superstars actually ended up getting paid proportionally more money relative to their peers than they were before. It was the lower-performing middle-tier players who truly absorbed the financial hit of that massive revenue reduction. Basically, in a heavily constrained system, teams prioritize giving every single available dollar to the absolute best players.
Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. We've seen that the NBA boasts the youngest, most diverse fan base out there, driving media rights into the tens of billions of dollars. But we've also just seen that these super complex, heavily legislated financial constraints completely fail to guarantee competitive balance. Instead, they just funneled more proportional wealth straight to the top performers. So as we watch streaming giants literally fight over the right to broadcast these games, you really have to ask yourself, in the business of basketball, are the intricate rules of the league actually in control, or does the true power and leverage ultimately lie entirely in the hands of its unstoppable superstars? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, guys. Keep questioning the data, and I'll catch you next time.